Well, good evening, everybody, and all the loyal listeners of I Still Call It a Lariat Podcasting Nation. This is another exciting, unscripted, unpredictable episode of Down the Wrestling Rabbit Hole. I am one half of this tandem that brings you this craziness, the zaniest that we call pro wrestling. I'm Howard Meat Sweats Morgan, and joining me as always is my faithful tag team partner, the world famous chick magnet, Mozart Fontaine. Mozart, what's going on, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. Welcome, listeners. Didn't we? Are we rebranded yet? Is it? I still call it a Lariat, or are we on the Lariat podcast network now?
We're on the Lariat Podcasting Network, but
yeah, we don't even know where we're at.
Yeah,
we don't even know where we are.
Yeah,
that's legitimate life, though. Like Howard and I never really know where we are.
Yeah, we have no idea. Listen, when I tell you that, and people think we joke or whatever, but we have no script. We have really.
We shouldn't.
We shouldn't, and we have no idea where we're going. Hence, the topic of tonight's show. Not sure if we've talked about it before, if we haven't, because we have so many side conversations during the week that
it's unreal.
Show ideas that we want to do that never make it to air. We probably have years worth of stuff that we never talk about
because we get sidetracked and right.
Yeah, and and we get we get that, I think we're both, you have that ADHD where we have this thing and then all of a sudden something sparked that comes, oh, look, let's go over there. And off we go. But, if this is another repeat of the same episode, maybe we'll give you some more insight on it. Hopefully it's not. And we learn a lot tonight. But I want to talk about Vince McMahon taking the WWF at the time, national, not so much him expanding to the WWF, but if it wasn't going to be Vince McMahon, now make no mistake, pro wrestling was going to go national. In the early 80s, the national boom still would have happened. It would have probably just been with a different quote unquote winner. The territory system was, I don't want to say breaking down, but it was starting to crack a little bit. Cable TV was exploding in popularity, which means more people got to see TV from all around the country. And someone was going to make this happen. Vince McMahon happened to be the guy to do it, and he was very successful for a long, long time. We can debate whether or not that's successful today or not, but Mozart, if Vince doesn't do it, who is it? And I have one, two, three. I have about four or five theories that we can go down. But right off the top of your head, if Vince doesn't do it, who's the guy or the, I'll call it territory, because that's what happened. WWF was a territory. It was the Northeast. And then of course it expanded nationally, and then exponentially went global after that. But who would have taken this thing? Like, the bull by the horns and taken wrestling national if it wasn't for Vince McMahon?
I think it would have been whoever had got control of cable TV. Cable TV was revolutionary at the time. It was akin to what streaming services have become, like what the worldwide net has become, that whole conglomerate of what we now watch anything on, right? Because you don't really need TV. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it on anything. We'll call it the net. We'll call it the interwebs, right? So the interwebs, whether you're talking about streaming services or just, YouTube, independent services like that, TikTok, whatever you're watching your content on. Back then, it was going to be whoever had the controlling interest of the TV, and that's what made Vince so crafty. Is he stole the controlling, and he stole the major TV out of every market. So who would it have been? It could have been 4 or 5 different people. Probably the strongest position at the time that happened was the Mid-Atlantic region, which became Jim Crockett Promotions. Bill Watts, but Bill Watts sold the Mid-South, which was rebranded as UWF. Because remember, he rebranded UWF in a bit of a positioning. He jockeyed a little bit to go national with that rebranding of the name. I think the talent was probably starting to shift out. They'd had a lot of deaths, but you had world-class championship wrestling, who was revolutionary with the way that they shot TV, with the production, with the music. So it was really going to be whoever, and then Florida was in the mix. I don't remember who had Florida. I think Dusty was back and forth. I know he did some work in. I don't think he had controlling interest, but the Florida territory had a good TV, and then of course you had the juggernaut, which was WWF, because in the entertainment world, New York and Los Angeles is like the mecca, and New York is legitimately the mecca of the entertainment world, right? So everything happens on New York time. So they were in a position from that perspective to be the New York territory, to have New York City, to have that kind of thing behind them. But yeah, who do you think was in the best position? I think it was clearly Crockett Promotions, because
I
that
was,
was the
and
battle,
it's funny,
or Mid Atlantic, because
right.
that's where Vince went and started the. Well, that
Oh,
was the Black Saturday was the big takeover when he got Ole. He screwed over Ole Anderson, wasn't it, right? And
yep.
got the TV slot.
Yep. And it was actually rejected by the Southern people because it wasn't their wrestling, as they called it. It wasn't. It was
Oh,
too
it was different.
cartoony. It was too
Yeah,
gimmicky. It wasn't that hard hitting wrestling that
right.
they've come to know. And I'm glad you hit on a couple of the points about who grabbed up cable TV and all of that, because yes, I think my first number one contender, if you will, to Vince McMahon taking this national would have been Jim Crockett Promotions, which was the precursor. WCW's precursor was Jim Crockett Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling, whatever you want to call it. Um, they had Ric Flair, they had Four Horsemen, they had Dusty Rhodes, but they also had a very key component in what you had said. They had WTBS, the superstation out of Atlanta.
WTBS, yeah. And
They,
Ted Turner was he backed wrestling, and that
yeah,
was a big battle at the end of WCW, because he wasn't really making the call anymore. So it went all the way up into the 90s. Turner was involved in that.
yes, and Turner was a wrestling fan long before he buys
Yeah,
WCW because of TBS and Georgia
hmm,
Championship Wrestling, which had the time slot before
yeah,
Jim Crockett Promotions took it over. So I think that Crockett kind of, you know, has a stranglehold on the national TV because he's got access to cable. He's got access to
yeah.
Ted Turner's money. Of course, Ted goes on to,
Howard, wasn't it? Am I wrong, or wasn't it Georgia first? Georgia's where he infiltrated Black Saturday. But then as
yes,
we progressed along, Crockett, had hired Dusty. They were getting red hot. They were making a play to go national. So I think that it started with the Georgia territory, which
yes.
probably was. I always saw that as interchangeable with Mid Atlantic. I think it was technically part of the Mid Atlantic territory. I'm not sure about that.
Well, that's
Um,
I've always
or,
considered
or
it.
was it booked differently? Didn't Sandy Scott have one? Again, I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. Maybe we didn't research this well enough. I think Ole was booking Georgia, and
He
I
was
know Sandy
booking
Scott
Georgia,
was
yes.
doing stuff in one of the territories. And Sandy
Yeah,
was a good booker. Like, he had some really cool, you know, angles going on.
right. So, we have, you know, essentially Jim Crockett, let's say he goes national and does, you know, what we've come to know as, the Hulkamania era. Does it become a Flair slash Horseman era with how, listen, Ric Flair was
Oh, we forgot Vern too. We forgot AWA because they had the ESPN, so they
you
were a player
you
too.
forgot Vern. I didn't forget Vern.
I forgot Vern. Yeah, Vern was a. I was trying to think of all the guys who had some type of either syndication, but Vern was big because he had ESPN.
Yeah, and
I
ESPN,
mean,
yes.
that was. I don't think the product was ever strong enough to go
And,
national,
and, it,
but
and it
I
was
think
it
that
was buried. Yeah, it was buried at a shitty time. Honestly,
yeah,
it wasn't prime time. It was either like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or like 11 o'clock at night,
I
something like
love how
that.
my tag team partner just pulled his hand back from outside the rope
Well,
when you go. You forgot
you,
Vern. Thanks,
you,
Howard.
you.
I did forget Vern. Yeah. How could I forget that? Because I was trying to think of everybody who had a major TV deal at the time, and it was the TBS guys. It was Vern with AWA. Watts had syndication though, and so did Fritz
Yeah,
in
Watts had
WCCW.
some. In fact, I
Portland
thought,
got out this way, but I think that was almost accidental. I don't think that it was real. I think it was just because the wrestling was popular.
Right.
I'm not sure how that happened. I don't know enough about that history, but
I, I
Watts
think
and
I think Watts. I want to say, was it like channel 57 or
well, he
48?
was syndicated, what they would call syndication, because it was on the local. For the young folks, that you had your local, and you still do. You had your local TV station,
Right.
but the cable companies were WTBS, ESPN, and even Vince at the time was syndicated. There was no USA deals or
No, there
any of
wasn't the
that, so
USA
he
yet.
was
No.
still. That was what they referred to as Black Saturday when he got cable TV. When he got into Ole's, and I believe it was Ole. He got into that boardroom, whatever he did, and I can't remember. And I used to know all this stuff, and that was why it was a big deal, because it was a major cable network, and simultaneously was stealing the other major. We'll keep it simple and call it. There were two majors going on, which was ESPN and Vern Gagne's Minneapolis group, AWA, and Georgia Championship Wrestling, which was a staple of the NWA. It was NWA, but for those who are a little bit younger, it was the Georgia territory was the one that was syndicated. Everything else was, again, not syndicated. That was the one that was run weekly on national TV. The other territories were pretty much syndicated, like, if you wanted to consider Mid-South, UWF. That also confuses the situation when we'll keep the NWA and the fragments of it and the different territories out of it, but it was because we're talking about who had cable TV and who was in a position
Right.
to move it there. So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, because you can get deep on this, like
Yeah.
real deep.
And like I said, I remember Bill Watts coming on either 48 or 57, but again, it was late.
Yep, 57, man. I watched it as a kid too.
Yeah.
That was UW, your UHF Philadelphia channel.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. UHF Philadelphia. But do we get, and does a Flair, Horseman, Dusty, Magnum, Russians, again at that time, the Road Warriors were just coming into Crockett. Can they carry a company national? I mean, obviously Flair. I mean, Flair was an icon, before national expansion. Really a, especially in 84, 85 with Hulkamania being the way he is. Flair
I think so.
was still a true world champion. I don't know that Hogan traveled the world as much as Flair did.
No,
In that
and that
time.
was the psychological operation, because I told you, I was telling you offline, I just saw this really good interview with a psychologist, a naval psychologist, talking about what psychological operations are, psyops.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be something like McDonald's getting you to want to go buy that Big Mac. So it's not always nefarious and, oh my God, we're going to do a psyop on the people and make them think that aliens are coming to kill us. Because, by the way, people, if they're coming, they ain't coming to kill us, because if they could have, they would have already. Trust me. Have you seen people? So I would if I were them. But anyway, the little bit of psychological operations Vince was playing was he made the rest of America think this is Southern wrestling. It wasn't necessarily at that time, because you were starting to pull in people from different. You still had your Southern stars, and I love Southern wrestling, but Vince really made people think, well, that's just hillbilly Southern wrestling crap. This is the World Wrestling Federation. Like, he would go out of his way to not say wrestling; it was the Wrestling Federation, and he was trying to make everybody think, well, this crappy little product down here, we're New York, we're the entertainment conglomerate, let us entertain you. Even long before he said it's not wrestling, it was still entertainment in his
Right.
mind. And he was bringing Liberace. These were plans that he had. He was bringing Liberace. He was going to make it a big spectacle. Whereas Dusty and Crockett were still more traditional. But to answer your question in short, my feeling is yes, they could have carried it. And they could have carried it because Flair was a worldwide star. And Flair was not a Southern wrestler. Flair
Right.
was a well-spoken Minneapolis-born dude. Most of the guys they were running with as top stars then had come out of that Minneapolis area, whether it was from Sharky's or Vern's camp. So they were coming out of the Midwest. They didn't have Southern accents, which made it really hard for me. That was my question. Why was Arn Anderson have that little bit of Southern drawl, just a slight, but Ole didn't, because Ole wasn't from down there, right?
Right.
So, You had the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, obviously. Like Gene and Ole weren't Southern guys; they were Midwestern guys. So I think they could have, Howard, because you didn't have a as Vince convinced everybody very successfully. There wasn't a roster full of guys with a Southern accent who were good old boys with a straw hanging out of their mouth, and that's what I think. As I've thought about it over the years, what probably was really overlooked in this, because it's obvious. Okay, yeah, we can look at history. He got the TV. He got Hogan. So at the same time, for any young listeners who are interested, he wasn't just getting TV. He was gearing up his big star. He was stealing Hogan from the Midwest.
Right.
So even though Vern's product was starting to get Vern Gagne, the AWA, American Wrestling Association, it was association, not alliance. It was the National Wrestling Alliance.
Right.
And I think it was it was National Wrestling Association up until the 50s. I'm pretty sure about that. But anyway, so it became the Alliance, and they had this really nice system. That's great. Vern was his own territory, although he did talent trade back and forth when it benefited, which is fine.
Right.
I'm not sure. Again, that we talked about that. I'm not sure. Not sure it's ever been super successful that two big companies cross promoted, cross pollinated, and it didn't hurt one of them more than the other. To me, it never worked out that way. Like somebody's group always looked a little weaker. But anyway, as we dig through our rabbit holes, I think that what we overlook is the fact that Vince just one of the most successful parts of that takeover. So for it to work like it did, I think it had to be Vince McMahon. I think that
Yeah.
he would have gotten to a point where, and this did happen within the NWA, where Dusty and Jim Crockett and the guys that all worked for him, whoever the booker was at the time, because they went through a few, they, as the old saying is, the NWA promoters couldn't agree on what to have for lunch in
Right.
the annual NWA meetings, which decided who was going to do what, where, in what territory, how much they were going to get the NWA champion. I've heard varying things on everything was discussed down to who was going to be a champion in each territory. So you had guys breaking off, you had promoters breaking off. Fritz broke off, and I think Rick Rude, who was the American heavyweight champion, became the world class world champion.
Yes.
Which, by the way, when we were talking about belts, if you haven't seen that title belt, that's a sharp one. So is the American. The American title belt, though, Howard, remember, was basically the same format, because I thought it was cool they kept similar formats. It was the same format as the national heavyweight title and the world television title. So the American heavyweight title looks similar. But I think they discussed all that. Like I don't think the promoters had a whole lot of autonomy on what they were going to do in their own promotion. But I could be wrong about that. It might have just been around the heavyweight championship. It'd be interesting to find out, because I don't remember. So anyway, it had to be Vince.
Yeah. No. It absolutely had to be Vince.
At Vince.
Yes.
The buck stopped at Vern, but Vern by that point, remember, was getting up there in age, and he was way out of touch. I mean, you see some of his mid '80s TV productions. I mean, there's like 5 people in the crowd, and they just weren't. They weren't hip. I mean, they weren't going to be able to go national. They had the star, they had the power to do it until those guys were rated. Everybody from Kurt Hennig, who became Mr. Perfect, to, I mean, Scott Hall was there. The Midnight Rockers, who were later became the Rockers, and of course Shawn Michaels' career is legendary, but Marty as well, renowned for his in-ring work. So a lot of people came out of there. You can't underestimate what Vern played in all this too.
No, but actually, I have, so I had Jim Crockett as number 1, and maybe 2.
Howard makes the list. I'm shooting from the hip. I don't even have paper. Howard's got paper, pen. He's ready to go.
Well, because I'll forget, and then I'll be like, oh, I wanted to,
ask me what I just said 5 minutes ago. I had no idea.
Right. So I think number 2 would have been, as you mentioned earlier, Bill Watts' Mid-South Wrestling.
He was positioning himself. It was clear.
And I think Bill had a lot of things going for him. I mean, he understood, not just storytelling, but episodic storytelling. Week to week, the story has to has to
Yeah.
be, coherent and have some continuity going, you know, from week to week, because we're going to be on every week, and
Hmm.
maybe twice a week. So this all has to make sense. He
Yep.
understood, baby faces, and again, we're talking a different era. Baby faces chasing, the bad guy, and he definitely understood, how to get his wrestling personas, whoever they were, to get heat better than anybody. I
Yeah.
mean,
His stuff was
and
good. Yeah.
and he had, you know, top stars. Again, we talk about Vince poaching them. Vince poached every one of these guys. He had JYD, he had Ted DiBiase,
Took
he
a
had
lot of
Hacksaw
guys.
Jim Duggan, and he was already expanding in the Midwest. I know he'd gotten into Texas. I don't have all the
That's
states in front of
three
me.
things. I overlooked that, Howard. That's three things right up front that Vince did. So he got TV, he got stars, and that psychological operation of, oh, that's Southern wrestling. But watch me take Ted DiBiase, and now he's the $1 million. I mean, he really did brand them for a national audience, right?
He did.
Um,
He did.
so, I didn't necessarily like it at the time as a kid, but I think Mr. Perfect was more marketable than, I don't understand why you couldn't call him his real name, but the persona was more marketable than just Kurt Hennig, the wrestler, because Kurt was great. Kurt had lineage. His dad was legendary, Larry the Axe Hennig. So that's a three-prong attack right there, and there's probably more. So as you move through, I'll pick out other stuff.
So, and now imagine the Attitude Era started in late 97. I don't remember exactly when. The
Hmm.
WWE's Attitude Era starts in 1997. If it was Bill Watts, the Attitude Era would have started in 1985 with
Hmm.
how Bill was telling TV and how he was, positioning his people. And I mean, we talked about it on air on different podcasts here in the VOC Nation, where he had the Junkyard Dog written off TV for like 6 months because
Yeah.
the Freebirds had put some kind of hair gel or hair remover in his eyes and
Oh,
accidentally
yeah.
blinded him. And
Freebird hair cream, man.
yes, and he
You look like
went.
you got a hold of some because you're
Yeah,
looking a little,
I did, but it wasn't an accident. I did this on purpose.
Oh, okay.
Um, but just all of that going to the length of, even if he went out shopping, he made sure he had to put the eye patch on with the bandage. He kept his shades closed when he was home.
Different era. Yeah, it's
So you can
way
imagine
different now.
Attitude Era type on now on a national level, not just a regional level. Attitude Era storytelling in 1985, like 10 years, 12 years before it becomes cool and hip, in 1987 with Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
But again, Vince probably still the only guy that would have been able to do it. But I
Yeah,
think
well, it was a business plan, and it seemed to be really well thought out. Like there's that. I don't think it's wrestling lore. I think it's become wrestling lore. But if Senior had known what Junior was going to do, what I've been told, by a lot of guys who were in that era and lived it and even worked close to them, is he would have never sold it to him if he knew what he had planned. Um, because again, that was bucking everything traditional in the wrestling system at the time.
yeah,
It was good and it was bad. I mean, it was good in terms of guys were going to start making bigger money. There was bigger opportunities. There was more work, but not unlike kind of where we're at today, which they're making the biggest money they've ever made. How long is it going to last? So it seems to me the trend is the bigger the paydays are at the top and all around, the less that era lasts. It's that mentality of go for the quick money instead of go for the long term, uh, you know, sustainability. Now, if I'm devil's advocate to myself, the money that they're making today, you could work for 1 year, quit, and never have to work again, to be
right,
fair.
yeah, yeah. No,
But
absolutely.
it's, these huge contracts are great, but there's drawbacks to that too. And we are seeing that today in terms of, I don't think people are putting in, they're going to make what they're going to make regardless, period. It's not going to
Right.
change if they have a shitty performance. Um, if the guys back on top then weren't doing well before guaranteed contracts, they weren't going to be in that spot. There's no question about it. They
No,
were
no.
going to be, there was somebody else always waiting in the wing. For the most part, from the bottom of the card to the top, and I say bottom of the card just not because of their ability to wrestle or work, where they're positioned, were super talented for the most part. So you get the right guy, the right chance, and they could have all been stars. Theoretically, wasn't going
Right.
to really work out that way, but on paper, they had enough talent to do that in terms of presenting their product. So we're not in a real. We're almost like they say it's cyclical, but we're almost right back to that, though. Do you think? Because now it's the global expansion. Now everybody wants the global market, but what's the payoff other than a lot of money right now on the table? What's the long term payoff? I don't see it.
No, I don't. This has no sustainability. You
No,
know,
I mean none.
I don't know. You know, if you and I are able to talk these same talks even probably 5 years from now. Like, I don't know how long it is before, or short, I should say, it is before this kind of runs out, because it's going to run out.
Yeah.
It's going to burn itself out. It's going to.
Well, the two most successful eras in wrestling theoretically did,
Yeah.
right? So the real golden age, the first golden age, you know, well, I don't know. Let me stand corrected. I guess the first real big boom was probably 20s and 30s. It just blew up. It was as popular as any mainstream sport. It
Well,
was
it brought it
treated
out
like
of
a
the
mainstream.
carnivals and
Came out
into.
of the carnivals
Yeah,
and
and I
onto
don't say
its own
living rooms yet
shows.
because TV hadn't hit, but it
TV was the next big. So the TV era has obviously sustained the longest. So you want
right.
to say what around the 50s? Gorgeous George was the catalyst to that. And if you're unfamiliar with George's work, then he's worth looking up. Just a picture of him. I mean, he was who Muhammad Ali based his entire in-ring persona on. You know, and yes,
Yeah,
Muhammad Ali had a persona, and he was very open about that. Gorgeous George was one of his favorites. Um, in terms of talking them into the building. He loved the promo style. He was influenced by that style of George's talking and his grandiose. Obviously, he didn't wear a powdered wig like Gorgeous George, but that would have been great. So TV probably lasted the longest. But let's go to the more modern eras when Hulk Hogan, Rock and Wrestling, that lasted what maybe a decade, and then there was a little bit of a lull. Things were going funky, and there was, you know, until Stone Cold and kicked off, and you had the Attitude Era,
right. The
and
Attitude Hour / Monday Night Wars kind of blended in.
that's for better or worse. I don't even think that was 10 years. I don't think that lasted maybe 5 at its height. I'm not sure. Once the Monday Night Wars ended, and there was nothing for Vince to buy, and
It lasted
he had
exactly
already
5 years, according to the internet. I mean, I
yeah
had November right. It started November 8th, 1997, and died on May 5th, 2002.
yeah,
So
and that's
short
when
5 years.
they I don't view whatever they called it. Right? They had names for everything. Like when they were putting Cena on top, my opinion is they made a fatal mistake with Cena by letting him become polarizing and pushing him as that. I think that's when Vince started to get out of touch to me. He was listening to the wrong people, watching the wrong products, being influenced by flip fads, flash in the pan. Because the second that you alienate your audience and one side loves this one and one side loves that one, and the audience is constantly volleying on one particular star, um, go get your roast beef, man. I know I don't want you to choke, but
No, no, no,
yeah,
no.
I'm here
I'm not
watching.
heating anything up. No,
I'm here. If you need to eat, I'm here for you. I got it
no.
on 911.
I'm good.
Um,
But
but
I don't want to. I think what Vince, and this is going to sound dated when I say it,
say
what I
it.
think Vince understood in 1984, 85, when he was gearing up to do this full speed ahead, was
Yeah.
there was money in television wrestling. Now, you say,
Oh
well,
yeah.
there's always money in television wrestling. No, there wasn't. Television wrestling was for all intents and purposes, considered a loss. All it was for promoter Howard, for promoter Mozart, to have an hour-long commercial about an event that we're going to have in your area. And this is the best way to advertise for it, is to bring these guys that are coming to your town, that are coming to, Philadelphia, they're
Yeah.
coming to Baltimore, they're coming to Charlotte, they're coming, to New
And that
York,
was
to
hence
Boston.
the syndicated. That was hence like the syndicated, type of thing was like, to push. That's why it was localized. And then
Right.
when you got to the cable side of it, I think that's when somebody somewhere was probably saying, "Oh, cable's national." Ooh,
Yes. Right.
okay,
And now we take our program from a local, hey, we'll be in Philadelphia, we'll be here, we'll be there, to, hey, we are all over the place. Now we're here tonight in Baltimore, but tomorrow night we're going to be in Omaha, Nebraska, right in
yeah.
your backyard. And then
They try, because even and I remember now too. I told you I remember stuff that you say. Even the Von Erichs had a spot on ESPN.
yes,
So it wasn't exclusive to just AWA, but I think they were on there at the same time. Maybe I might be
we're
wrong about
close to
that,
it. I think it was real close. Yeah.
but they were trying to expand out of Texas, and AWA was trying to expand. It
Well,
was
I'm glad you mentioned AWA, because he's third on my list, and I think what gets,
mhm.
I don't want to say overlooked, because it doesn't get overlooked by guys that are as mature as us, because I don't want to call us old. Guys as mature as us, is Vern had every single piece of this puzzle. He just couldn't put it together. He had Hogan, he had Heenan, he had
It was
Okerlund, he had
presentation.
Ventura, he had all of these guys that went on to be. Now Ventura was more in a broadcasting position at that time, but he had all of these guys that that really made. I mean, Hogan, Heenan, and Okerlund are three iconic names in the rock and wrestling thing.
Came out of there, yeah.
Without those three, I mean, Hogan being who he was, but you can't overlook what Okerlund and Heenan did at that time as well. I mean, Heenan was the constant guy trying to vanquish Hogan because he hated him and was all anti-Hogan everything. If it didn't matter. And Vern had major cities. He had like that
Yeah, he had some.
Midwestern Chicago, Minneapolis. He ventured out into further, I think, Denver or somewhere out there. And then he gets to deal with ESPN. So if he would have just, and Vern's, and I don't want to say problem, but Vern's hang up was, Vern was a very much a wrestler's wrestler. You had to be able to technically wrestle to be anything with Vern Gagne.
Well,
Or he
look how
was.
many guys came out of there that Vince transitioned. Like Rick Martel was an AWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Yes.
And then he's in Strikeforce. Then he's the model. So you take a guy of that talent, you give him the right persona. What I mean, Bockwinkel was a great wrestler, but he never grabbed my attention because he didn't really have a persona. He was
He
just
didn't.
a
He was just Nick
scientific
Bockwinkel.
wrestling guy, and that's where Vern was kind of got left in the dust. And I think that's pretty much. I think most historians agree on that. He just didn't have the foresight. He didn't want Hogan as a champion. Hogan wasn't a
No.
real wrestler in his eyes. He gave that up. He gave that to Vince.
Yes.
Um, and then there was, of course, I mean, I'll just say, I'm in wrestling. I'm pretty sure it probably happened. I think it's pretty safe to say that, he wanted to have Sheik, double cross Hogan and hurt him, you know.
Yeah.
But luckily, Sheik was smart enough to say, well, no, because, I'm stick with Vince too, because there's where the money's going. I think people saw the writing on the wall, like think about the great wrestlers. I mean, I don't think there was anybody there that wasn't great. I mean, for the most part, he took the really, really great wrestlers and they ended up as a staple of late 80s, early 90s WWE roster / TV product. One Man Gang ended up there,
Right.
when that was Bill Watts. I'm sorry. I guess he did maybe did, I don't know. The Road Warriors eventually ended up there, although I wouldn't consider them plucked from there because they had been to Japan. They were in
Yeah, they
more
jumped from
so with
AWA to Jim Crockett.
the Jim Crockett. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had same thing. Eventually, you had Rick Rude. Eventually, you had Barry Darso. Eventually, you had
Vader. Vader came
Vader.
out of the AWA.
Yeah, Leon White. He was the baby bull, Leon White. That's who I was thinking of. Not gang. I was thinking of like
But there was
Mhm.
it was, I don't know, less than a 20-minute video on YouTube that I was listening to on my way to work. I wasn't watching it. I was listening to it because I can listen to it. And
Yeah,
it
I
was
don't
it
believe.
was it was the downfall of the AWA and what it centered around. I mean, it touched on Hogan and all these guys being poached away and
Right.
all that stuff. But what it centered on was there was a meeting with Vince and Vern. I don't know where they met. I don't know if Vern came up or Vince came out or whatever. But Vince offered Vern millions of dollars to sell the AWA, which would have set Vern up really for the rest of his life. We're talking, I think it was tens of millions of dollars, but I don't want to say that definitively because I don't remember. But we're talking tens of millions of dollars in the mid 80s or so. So however many more millions of dollars that is now. But what Vern got stuck on was, and the only demand that he made was he wanted his son Greg to have a job with WWE forever. And Vince just wasn't willing to employ a guy forever. And he walked away. And then, I mean, obviously years later, he buys it literally for pennies on the dollar, and
Yeah,
the rest is history. But, he walked away from the AWA. He wanted the library. He wanted the name. He wanted all of the talent,
yeah.
and literally walked away because something as simple as you won't give
I
this
didn't
guy
know
a
that.
job in your
Okay.
company. And
It's a
I'm
little
like,
similar to the deal with Stu Hart, though, because he ended up with Calgary, and Stu wanted the boys there, so you got Brett and
right.
Owen, and most of them, I think they all at some point did something there. Um,
No, they did.
you know, but
But that was a
yeah,
deal
so
that you got to have a job for my boys. Like I want
yeah,
here's my group of guys that I'm sending
and
to you.
look at that talent pool too. So again, this is part of him poaching talent. I mean, he went to the best of the best. He went and
Yeah,
got Brett Owen, Davey
the
at Dynamite,
Davy.
Super
Yep.
Bulldogs, who else did he get? Because that wasn't it. Geez, I can't think now. I mean, he had
Did
anybody
he
and
get
everybody.
Bad
'Cause
News Allen from there?
he got Bad News Allen, yeah. He had a number of. He had access to a lot more guys because of the ties. Harley toured Calgary a lot. He was a big staple as the NWA World Champion up there when the NWA was strong in 70s and I guess into the early 80s until he moved the belt to Flair. But just the access to talent that he had, and a lot of guys, it's obviously like infamous, like Harley wasn't going. He was offered to go, and so there were guys that said no, who ended up there anyway at some point to make a good deal of money, I'm sure. Um, pulling guys out of Mid South, you get Jake the Snake Roberts, he got One Man Gang eventually,
Right.
he got, missing a bunch of names, he got ended up with Michael Hayes, although I'd say that the Freebirds at their height to me was UWF and World Class Championship Wrestling. And then by the time they got to NWA, it was more WCW, and he kind of got
Well,
various
and
incarnations.
there's a story out again that I listened to. It was the Freebirds' first run, which
Yeah.
was about 84, 85 ish. It was only literally from the way I hear it, it was like 11 days. And on day like 6 or 7, something like that, they came in late, and they may or may not have been a little overserved at whatever establishment they left that made them late to the arena. And Andre the Giant was in the locker room, and they said, Andre said, "Yo, guys are late, can't be late." And Michael Hayes like, "Well, you don't sign my paychecks, you don't, you're not my babysitter," and just really ripped into Andre. And Andre says, "Well, you won't be here tomorrow." And Michael's like, "Yeah, you think you got that pull?" Literally, they were driving to the next show. When they got to the next show, they were informed that they were no longer employed by WWF.
I didn't know. I knew that they had a short run there, and they
Very
were just.
short,
I
yeah.
didn't know. Yeah,
And all because
that's interesting.
you pissed off Andre the Giant, really, because
Wow.
that's what Andre told me. So I'm going to go see what the boss
It
has
was
to say.
there were certain. I mean, when you were drawing, I guess was probably a little bit of the maybe a cultural difference from the southern territories. Like, I don't know that everybody was going to be okay with that. I think there's certain bookers, promoters, owners, whatever, that wouldn't tolerate that. But I think maybe because of how huge of a draw. Again, I laugh when I see modern stars come out and they get this pop and everybody's acting like that's the biggest thing ever. You got to go back and watch the Freebirds, the Von Erichs come to the ring. They can't even get to the ring. Dusty at one point was that popular. Flair. There's probably 100 guys that the crowd reaction that they got would virtually make anything that you see today, even in a 100,000 seat arena, look almost like it's okay.
Yeah, and I'm glad
That when you're generating, I can understand a young guy like that who's good looking young dude at the time, Michael Hayes, and he's on fire. Everybody wants him. I could understand. I wouldn't do it, but I can understand. They think they're in a position. It's like, oh, okay, But then, it seemed kind of stupid to me because the Giant was legendary and nobody wanted to piss off the Giant for a multitude of reasons. But either way, no matter how it happened, I'm sure it was some type of unprofessionalism that just wasn't going to be tolerated because, again, they're getting ready to go national expansion. It's about to be corporate.
right,
Things were going to change a little bit, and that if some of those wild-eyed Southern boys literally weren't going to make it in that atmosphere because they were too untamed, I think is
right,
probably that's just my guess.
right. I'm glad you brought up the Von Erichs and the Freebirds because that's Fritz Von Erich in world class. As you
Yeah,
alluded to earlier, I mean he had the presentation. I mean, if you go back and look at when you compare 84, 85, let's say 83 and 85 wrestling TV productions,
yeah,
WWF's wasn't that great. Jim Crockett's wasn't that great. Mid-South was probably a little bit
yeah,
better. But my gosh, World Class was a production. Like I
yeah,
said, they brought the music in. They brought the big arena lighting and a
yeah.
big production for its time. I mean now we look at it, everything is now a production. But
They took it out of the studio a bit more, I think, a lot more than say like Georgia Championship Wrestling.
yes,
Watts wasn't really a studio product either. Memphis was. Jerry Jarrett and Lawler and them. They were kind of a studio based production, although they did sell out that Mid South Coliseum like once a week, which is think
yeah.
about that. I don't know what it holds, but even still, think about that once a week and. By comparison, the biggest company, WWE, can go to a town once a year, and it's not a guaranteed sellout now.
No,
And many
not at
times
all.
it's not. So these are red hot promotions. There's so many variables. They could have went so many different ways, but I think we probably really nailed who exactly was in the really good position to do that national thing. But
So for the record, the Mid South Coliseum now
yeah,
for basketball, and I'm going to add a little bit. I'm going to WWF the number a little bit because for
oh
basketball it's 11,200. So if you
yeah,
figure if you add another 500 seats in for
yeah,
courtside,
right around
you're looking
11,
at
12,000.
12,000
Yeah.
people. 12,000 people every once a week.
It's Monday
For the,
nights, I think it was. Yeah.
yeah, I was saying it was during the week. It was Monday or Tuesday night. You
Uh-huh.
know, so that's what 12, 24. That's 48,000 people a month that you're selling tickets to.
And you're
You know,
probably getting a huge percentage of return customers too, once a week.
right? Yes,
Obviously
absolutely.
tickets weren't $8,000 then either. So, but
No, no.
even still, that's a great house. That's what the TV product was meant to do, as you mentioned earlier. And it really was a cool system. Was it becoming antiquated? I think it was a little bit. I think it was getting a little out of date, especially because you had cable TV. Cable TV, let me not take credit from Vince McMahon, but cable TV was just as much of the culprit as Vince was, because once you had cable TV, your syndicated show wasn't as important anymore. Now you have a
No,
national reach. Now you can sell ad dollars. Because in those days, if I'm not mistaken, early TV, wrestling was super easy to produce. All you did was record a live show. So you virtually spent no money to make your show. So
right.
anything, any type of deal that you got, and I think if I'm not wrong, I even heard of promotions even paying to get on TV because
That's I
that's
was
how
gonna say.
important it
I
was to their
remember.
live show.
I remember Cornette and Lawler talking about that. They call it a canned show, right? So
Yeah,
right, essentially for you as youngins, there used to be these things
youngins.
called VHS tapes. They were like, I don't know, about that big.
That's
Uh,
what Steve's watching right now. He went to
you're
get his
right,
VHS tapes.
and they were about that thick. And what you did was you recorded a 1 hour or an hour and a half wrestling program, and you UPS'd it or mailed it to ABC, XYZ, and said, play this on Friday night, at 9 o'clock or whatever. The guy would put the tape in and let it run, and you would have all of your stuff in there. And yes, a lot of times you had to pay to play your own program. So it was costing you money. But what it did, as I talked about earlier, was it sold you going to that town or
Put
coming to that
12,000
town.
people in a seat once a week. I think the little
Right.
nominal fee
Yes.
it probably cost was well worth it at the time.
Right.
I
So
think,
yeah,
I
if I
guess.
know I'm going to sell 12,000 seats, and I got to spend a couple of dollars on a Friday night, but I'm selling 12,000 seats that next Monday, yeah, I'm going to spend that money.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people can't. I don't think the younger generations understand. If you're under the age of 35, I'll say, and if you say, "Oh, well, I saw that," I'm just ballparking here because I don't remember because I am old. But if you're under 35, go to YouTube and YouTube World Class Championship Wrestling, and and more specifically, focus on the Von Erichs, any of the matches that they're in, because these guys were legitimate rock stars in the state of Texas.
You know who else was tailor made for TV, and he would have been, because he passed away, was Gino Hernandez. Gino
Yes, I
was
was saying
tailor
Gino
made
Hernandez,
for
Chris Adams.
TV.
What did they call them?
They
The dynamic duo, was it?
yeah. Hmm.
They were a great tag team. Gino Hernandez going way, way too young. Gino Hernandez was the Texas version of Ric Flair. Drove all the
Yeah,
fast
he was
cars, had the
really.
jets, had the
Yep.
girls, the cool sunglasses, the fur coats, the suits, the rings, the watches, and he was just
Yeah,
but he was a great worker. And if you get a chance, I think Dark Side of the Ring did
it did. Nice,
an
nice
episode
piece
on
on
Gino
him.
Hernandez, and go back and
Yeah.
watch Hernandez and Adams against any of the Von Erichs. And like Mozart has alluded to on several episodes, watch the Von Erichs struggle to get to the ring, and you will
Yeah, not.
understand the kind of drawl that they
I saw
had.
something earlier. It kind of was interesting to me, and I answered right away. It said, "Who was the best wrestler of the Von Erichs?" And I'm like in my head right on, like David by far. Um, but they were all the three main boys were really good at certain things that they did. Of course, Carey maybe had one of the best physiques ever in wrestling. Looks like a Greek god.
Yes,
Kevin was just this ungodly freak of an athlete. Fairly good looking. The girls were still into him, and David too. The girls, that's the thing, is females in wrestling back then wasn't as prevalent as it was watching now. But those guys would draw the females to the Texas Stadium, for example. That was their big show. Once a year. But anytime they got out of the sportatorium, out of the TV, and went to an arena somewhere else, or even there, it was just the noise level was so crazy with just a few. I don't know what the sportatorium held, wasn't very many people, but uh, I've seen Stone Cold talking about that. Steve Austin started down there, The Undertaker. So these are, without, in some weird way, all of those different promotions contributed to the national expansion at some point or
Yeah,
another in that said expansion. Now again, we're way beyond a national expansion. It's international now. There was an international expansion. Now it's pretty much a global expansion. Because before you'd go to the UK, maybe an Australian tour or something. Maybe across the border to Mexico. Now you're getting into the Middle East, and now it's deeper into Mexico. Now it's more tours of Canada and so I would call it now a global expansion, and that's where the next battle is who's going to get that global market. But here's the hard thing about the global market that's biting them. You're kind of putting the domestic fan, which is your main bread and butter, no matter how you cut it, in a bind when it comes to prices, availability to see some of the content live. At least you can always go back and watch it streaming now, but people like to see that live.
there are people who want to see it live, and if
The
I
wrestling
gotta,
is kind of meant to see it live though, because especially
right,
now, because again, syndication, it was taped, and you may see it a week later or a couple of days later or whatever. I don't know how long it was. It was always taped in syndication, and you didn't have anywhere to get a spoiler though. Where were you gonna? You had to
yeah,
watch it, so
that's
it didn't
right,
matter. You were watching it 3 days, 4 days, 5 days later. Now, if you wait 3, 4, 5 days, you literally have to avoid the internet. You can't go to your Facebook account. You can't go to your Twitter. You can't. You can't even talk to your friends at the water cooler, because they're going to be, if they watch wrestling, they're going to be yipping and yapping about what you didn't see. So
right,
well, I say that with a grain of salt, because I don't think anybody's really talking much now about it. But if they are, you're going to find out what happened when you're like, wait a minute, I didn't see that yet. I'm trying to watch it later.
right, or
So people
you
aren't
happen to,
willing to wait to watch the major cards, and if they're taking, I'll say it now, taking Mania across the pond is, or not even across the pond, taking it to Saudi is going to be a huge death knell for them.
no,
I say it
absolutely,
now. Howard hears me say this all the time. The business is dead. The TV national wrestling is done. What we're seeing now is that flower still in the vase. Looks beautiful right now, but you cut it off from what gives it life. How long do you think it's going to last? That
right.
flower, when you give it to your wife, your mother, your sister, your brother, your husband, is already dead. Well, it looks beautiful. That rose looks beautiful in the grocery store, though, don't it, Howard?
That absolutely
They've
does.
cut off the lifeblood. They've cut off the fan. The fan is unhappy now. The fans are not happy.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what,
and I'm not unhappy because Ric Flair cheated Dusty Rhodes out of a world title. I'm mad
that's
because
different. That's following
yeah,
the
I
yeah.
can't I can't find it. You go overseas, and listen, I don't have a problem per se going overseas, but when you got to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday or 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday to watch a pay per view, and then to
It's
do it all
hard.
over again Monday morning to watch Raw because Raw is broadcasting from wherever they are, Sydney, Australia, or somewhere in the Middle East. It's like I don't want to do that. Like, people got to work. I don't want to listen.
There's
Getting
such a
up at
thing as overkill too. There's a reason why traditionally, and I know this firsthand from watching people book, being involved in it, performing it, you get about 2.5 to 3 hours of attention in the hottest of errors. You're not going to get them for 6, 7, 8 hours now, with
no,
90% of that card literally falling apart in front of your eyes. I've seen a lot of critique of the product online, and I didn't used to really read much. It didn't really interest me because I was doing what I was doing. I'm working with the independent groups that I work for, ECWA, Rayco's Pro for a number of years, and we're doing fine on a local level. We're doing it grassroots, whatever. But when you have the majority of fans really unhappy with what they're seeing, again, not who won or lost, although sometimes that becomes a big deal. And the reason that becomes a big deal is because they can look at certain talent and be like, that person's not good. So they can't rationalize why they're moving into, they want different people. One of the things that I always learned is you can't put a match together for yourself. You have to know, what Stroh always tells you, you have to know the room, know
right,
the room. So you have to put something together for the crowd. And the main thing is that booker, owner, whatever you want to call him, And by the way, I want to touch base too. As revolutionary as Fritz was in booking. I think he had David Manning book. I think that's who it was.
Yes, David Manning was doing the
So,
booking.
but
Yes,
Fritz was, I mean, again, it's Fritz's vision. It was his company. So you got to give him credit. But I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But the bookers of the day were responsible for telling the story in the ring, for putting the right talent. They were matchmakers. You made a match based on who was going to tell the best story, where you wanted to go with them as a persona, as a talent, how long they were, whatever the deal was you made, right? Because the first thing you got to do is find out what your talent's available for, right?
right.
Hey, we want to hire you for 6 months. Howard, can you clear 6 months of dates? Because if you can't, then we can't use you.
Right.
So deals went south on that too, just based on availability, timing, things like that. And they still do in independent wrestling. But the point I was trying to make is that what was I trying to make? I went down a rabbit hole and got lost. It's about
Yeah, I got lost too. You were
well,
talking
the
about
fans. You've
booking for
cut
the
off the
room.
fans. Yeah,
Yes,
working for the room. So you've cut off the fans, and it's very, very, very apparent because there's not very many. It's easy to say, oh, they're just armchair critics. They don't know what they're talking about. But the more that these folks have now moved into social media era, the net, everything's worldwide now. I can't say that that's a small percentage. It's a very large percentage that's unhappy with what they're seeing by and large. They're seeing really bad performances, whatever the reasons are, doesn't matter. They're
right.
seeing terrible performances. And I hate to say performance because at one point that was like, didn't talk about that, couldn't say that.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it, you're seeing things now that are clearly performances, and it's like going to see your favorite classic rock band and they just suck. They're missing notes. They're, again, very, very vocal about some of the classic rock bands and the vocalist in particular that's out there now. You're not getting the quality you got. That's what you're getting with wrestling now, except here's the difference. These aren't classic people. These are the young, up
No,
and coming new stars that are literally half my age. You can't accept that type of performance and expect the fan to want to pay the money that's being asked. It's really arrogant. It's by ownership, leadership, whoever it is, whoever's making the call. I don't know. I could guess, but I'm not gonna. As a matter of fact, I know in some cases, but I'm not gonna. Um, bad, bad business. That's why I'm saying it's dead. It's not me being dramatic. They've already cut the bottom of the rose. Now, is it dead forever? Nope. Why? Because we're a very forgiving culture. We're going to forget in a year that you really, really. I mean, let's just take this weekend's performance as shitty all the way around. I didn't see it, but I've not heard, and I won't. I haven't heard one good thing from my friends that are fans, my friends inside the industry, kids, and I've heard a lot. I've had people calling me and texting me to tell me how bad it was. I'm like, hey, didn't see it, sorry, but I believe you. Um, both of the bigger companies, by the way, too. So um, it's dead. It's when you have every demographic of your fan who's unhappy. Now it's just a matter of that kind of manifesting in your 3D. It's going to just wither up. You're going to lose your TV deals. I mean, hell, it's already all over the news that ESPN's unhappy. You know,
right.
who was it? Netflix, was it? Feels like they overpaid. I think. So now, yeah, you sure did. You bought the Kool-Aid for a minute there. When you have executives and fans alike, so you got your TV outlet, we'll just call it TV, it's streaming. And then you have your fans upset. That's a problem. Now, are we forgiving? Yeah. Because if you can come back and stop it right now, and again, at least one of the well, I guess two technically have the funding if they want to go on and on and on, but they won't be profitable at some point, either one. And especially if these deals get pulled or somebody's unhappy with the, I've heard people say, well, they have the Saudi money now, and that's kind of unlimited. Well, they have it for now. But again, your bread and butter is the domestic audience. It's not going to work the same. If you've watched those pay-per-views, there are things that as much as I respect the athletics of the women, they're dressed to be softcore porn for a certain demographic. You can't do that in the UK, or not UK, Saudi Arabia.
In the mid-area, right?
I mean, hell, they all have to dress in black, like from head to toe. Like you can't even see skin half the time.
You can't even see
Matter
their
of fact,
midsection or any of that.
yeah,
Like,
none of it. So the tactics that have kept them alive and afloat here are not going to work there. It's just not going to happen.
right.
It's short-sighted. It's take the money and run, which is not surprising with wrestling people. But man, I'm more long-sighted than that. I'll take a low to mid-side house as I'm building it up to sustain for the long term. I'll take a lull because I know that we just in a lull. I'll come back, but this is something different to me. So the question that I pose is, as we just talked about that 84, 85 expansion where Hulkamania was running wild and, everything was on fire. And then we get up to the Stone Cold era. Who's in a position to really, is WWE now? Because I'm not sure. They're not family owned anymore.
Yeah,
So
I
who's in a position to really take that bull by the horns and turn it around and make it red hot again, or at least hot enough that it's not dying.
I don't know that, and no disrespect to the boatload of talent that both of the big two have. I don't know that they have the people in the right places to turn it around, because it is more of a giant corporation. I like what you said earlier about knowing the room, because it's no secret. I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast with you, but I know I shared it on our Matt Madness on the VOC Nation when I went to that ECWA Night of Unusual Matches. And you, Sean Royal, and Aiden Chambers were the first match out of the box, and I thought, this is a friggin' mistake. Why are you going to put these three guys? And not because you're my friend or any of that, but I'm like, you have three seasoned guys.
We knew the plan.
Probably should be near the middle, because I mean, obviously the heavyweight title is going to be defended last, right? Like, I'm like, this is a mistake. Like they shouldn't do this. Like, and I'm begrudgingly watching the first maybe 2 or 3. I think you guys went 8 or 9 minutes, something like that. I'm watching the first minute or two. I'm like, can't believe, just like mad at myself, like, because, and listen, I don't know shit about booking, so I'm just mad at me, because that's not how I would have booked it, right? That's not, and
right.
And damn it, I would have booked it differently. And then I'm looking and I'm watching the crowd, and I'm like, they're building, like, and like I told you, and I shared it with Cheyenne Ortiz, who's the ECWA president, that night you guys kind of set the bar to where the next match had to leap off from, and it wasn't a low bar. I mean, you guys set that bar pretty high with that match, but every match built on the last one, and it never dropped really low. Now, listen, when I say there's lulls, there was a lull because the one match was over and the guys were going backstage, and then another match. So that was really the only lull, in the action. And just that. So you're right. I mean, you listen, and hats off to Reiner and whoever else put that whole card together, because it's almost like they had watched it and said, no, that this doesn't work. Let's move this match to here, and then rewatched it again until they got all the matches in the right spot, because I don't think anybody's that lucky, but their foresight and their knowing and trusting their talent. And listen, first of all, you should always start a show off hot, but didn't know that it was going to get that hot. And no disrespect to you, Sean or Aiden, but to me, I would have reserved you guys a little later. But again, that's what I know about booking, right? So,
Yeah,
you
it
know,
would have been a different match had we been asked to take a different spot. It would have been, I don't know about drastically different. It could have been based on wherever we were at, you know. Um, but it's funny to me because taking that same content of that match to the way that we designed the fight probably could have worked as a bookend and maybe closed the show or opened the second half. It's just because of the importance of the entire flow of the night. We were the best option, I think, to open. And I've been there many times, and I think if you go all the way back to traditionally in the when the Gold Dust Trio in the 20s came up with the idea of the stacked card, you know, Billy Sandell, Tuchmod, and, I believe it was Ed Lewis, Strangler Lewis. Even your opening card at the time, you know, it wasn't as honed as it is now in terms of a science, but they knew that those opener guys should eventually be their mid card guys, eventually to be their main event guys. It's just that because of the name recognition, it kind of it escalated up the ladder in terms of like name recognition a lot of times, you know. Um, an independent show now, or even any type of TV show now, is booked more like episodic TV,
right,
where you want to take that crowd on a ride. And again, what do you know, what do you want? How do you want to do it? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You know, you look at what you did last show. What are you going to do next show? Like, what, you know, and you can kind of tell sometimes when you go to promotions and they haven't really laid out a good long term plan. Sometimes the boys are good enough, and the girls. When I say boys, I also include the girls. That's just an affectionate term we always use. The boys are always. You might have a whole roster of really seasoned guys who just know how it should go, um, but there's only so much you can do if you don't understand the whole vision too. You know, like
right,
we understood that we didn't necessarily need or did know in that example like what exactly was how it was going to unfold, because it's fun for us to see everything unfold too, but we knew from the bigger picture guy what exactly we needed to accomplish and why.
right, right,
And then the next match knew what they needed to accomplish and why. And that's what you do. You theoretically should get that on TV, but I'm seeing that even fall apart now. I'm looking at stuff like, why would you ever put that in that spot? It doesn't look like the knowledge of how to really put together a show is being followed as much as it used to be. So now it feels a little more like, why is this here? You know, why is that there? Um,
right,
doesn't make any sense. And if you hit a formula that's working, for your, knowing your room, like if you know that you can do something similar every time with different guys. So in other words, you wouldn't put the same guys in the same spot, but you can still use the same template, just different guys,
right,
same
right.
type of match tempo or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't know what this. Getting back to the, you know, again, as I don't know, and it's hard. Listen, we do two shows a week, um, so I don't remember if I throw out I'm holding out for a hero line on here, or if it was on the VOC Nation. I
That's
think it was
funny.
here. But
I
again,
think it
holding
was
out for that hero. Um,
because I'm sure
I,
Steve had a
I
graphic.
if he doesn't have a Bonnie Tyler graphic on this show, then I'm going to have to sit down and talk to him.
Can we get Bonnie
Um,
Tyler? Bonnie, do you listen to the show? Can we interview
right,
you? Because we need a hero.
right. But Bond, listen, Bond, listen.
Yeah,
If you're
like Bond.
listening,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
come on, just call
yeah.
us.
Exactly. Are we
Call
kind of?
me.
We're not controversial enough for Bonnie Tyler to listen to. We got to say some bad shit. We got to get people talking, Howard.
Right, but I think I'm not sure what, and I don't want to say this like it's negative, but I don't know how much of the TV deal that TNA is signing
Mhm.
helps them or hurts them. I'm hoping it helps them. I mean, obviously it's got to help them, give them a little more
I would think
national
so. I
exposure.
mean, yeah, because
I'm
their only
hoping
exposure
they
now
can.
isn't it through it's through TNA or NXT's TV deal. So they're not
Right.
really featured. They get some good. They have gotten a nice rub, but it's time for them to get their own show because
And that's
there's
something I
some
think it's
talent.
time that they reestablish kind of their own identity. I mean, this is where
Yeah,
Joey Styles was from, Samoa Joe was there, you
I
know,
mean AJ
um,
Styles.
AJ Styles. My God.
I was like, was he there? You had me thinking, did you? Because I wouldn't be
No.
surprised at some point. But
It's been a long day. AJ Styles, yes, and a
yeah,
short-haired AJ Styles, which I kind of like that look better than the long-haired AJ, but that's
yeah,
just me. But so I hope TNA, and listen, they'll never be. I don't think they'll never be a number one or two, but man, they could make a strong three, a strong two, AB.
yeah,
And listen, there's nothing wrong with being number two in a in a global wrestling market like we have now. Um, being number two, if you're making money, I should say, if you're making money, for not
yeah,
hemorrhaging it, like I believe the current number two is, which by the way is number two in product production too.
yeah.
But I just don't, I hope TNA is able
Well, I mean,
to
that's my
push
my
through.
point is, at what point do you stop bleeding money? Like, it doesn't matter that you're infinitely rich. You won't be if you keep,
Right.
bleeding
And
money.
you didn't get
You
rich
know,
by making these stupid investments.
E- exactly.
Um,
So I think that anybody who thinks that that won't get pulled at some point is really naive. Like it will. Um,
right,
Unless magically all of a sudden it started turning this major profit. And there's some speculation that TV deal could be on the line. Much like WCW was when. That's the only comparison I'd make to WCW because it's vastly different. But much like when Turner was, Time Warner was buying WTBS, the Superstation. Um, they didn't want wrestling. Didn't matter what Ted Turner
right,
loved. It's a bigger something bigger's happening now. Somebody's buying somebody, but that could put AEW off of TV. What are you going to do then? You know,
right.
um,
Or does a it's again, you called it TV. We call it TV, but you hit it on the head earlier. It's streaming, right? We don't really watch
yeah.
TV. We stream things now, right? We can get on our phone, our laptop, tablet, to our TV, to really
There's
any
a perception
type of.
though too though if you can because somebody might say, oh well, they'll just start their own YouTube channel. That's fine, but it's not. There's a perception that you're not number two then if you don't have a real national TV deal. That you're just an independent
Right,
one because you can go watch independent wrestling on YouTube. That's fine, but nobody's calling your local independent a national company because they can stream it on YouTube. You need a
right,
real in place monetize because the point of a TV deal now is to make money. They're paying you for the content, hoping that they can recoup it in return by ad dollars or content dollars, and that's where WWE is really, really still ahead because it's really it's not a wrestling company anymore. Period. It's a content company.
it's
So
a
they're
content
still
company.
living off the content part of it, which again, remember my thing, snip, it's dead. Um, because it's getting fewer and far between that they can get content worth putting on um, Facebook WWE page or YouTube WWE. Now it's like, whoa,
Right,
man, your product's getting shady. You gotta look at the product and just fix it. I don't know what the solution is. Um, I know that there's some as a trainer myself. I know that there's some people that I'd like to be like, hey, can we have a chat? But uh, my point is I don't know what the overall solution is. It's not my job. If they paid me, I'd figure it out. Um, but I can tell you that that'll run out. It will all run out. Now the question is who steps up to resurrect it,
right. Now,
because
there's
that to me, that's where
I
it's
know
at.
producer Steve, right, and I know producer Steve is big on that Progress wrestling out of think it's Great Britain. Um,
Yeah,
does somebody like
Progress is a
that? Does
pretty
somebody
hot
like New
product.
Japan, like New
Well, New
Japan, or
Japan,
who is it?
here's my problem with New Japan. it's not the New Japan it was in the 80s and early 90s. It's now
No, it's
tainted by
not.
the American independent scene. It's tainted because they've put their major stars on every independent show that you can imagine in America. You go see Jushin Thunder Liger wrestle up the street from your house on some, local promotion. They're not being prudent either with what they're doing with stars. Um, I haven't seen them really create any red hot stars either. Anybody that will cross over to America on a real level. There's some potential, but they haven't put them in that product yet. In that. And honestly, I hate to say it, and there's going to be people that disagree. The only way that happens is WWE. That's how you made, Hakushi, Taka Michinoku when they were in the late 90s going in. The Great Muta was kind of made through NWA in the national TV scene. If you don't have national TV, it's definitely not AEW because that's basically like New Japan watered down. And it's
Yeah,
tainted what New Japan.
it's
It's
like New
tainted New
Japan Light or
Japan's
whatever you want to
aura,
call it.
really. So, and they do have a presence. I got a good friend that trains at the dojo out west. Talent's there. It's not a talent problem. It's all positioning and perception problem. You know what I mean? Like, unless these major stars are in WWE, by and large, the major portion of the wrestling fans, the mainstream, is not going to recognize them as crossover stars. You know,
Right.
um, and then again, if AEW loses TV, the guys that they have who are mega talented then lose their outlet to be seen on TV. So my thought was always, again, this could be a great thing with TNA getting a TV deal because maybe they need to pick up some guys. Maybe they need to put freshen up the roster a little bit, get some talent in. Um,
Right.
the there's my nightly update. Kids are getting a shower. Awesome. They're right upstairs. Just come knock on the door, right? Yeah. Um, God forbid. Must be
Right.
his steps. But they it's an interesting thing. I mean, I just have this gut feeling that we're on the cusp of a major. Uh, I would call it a revolution, but again, my belief is based on the last couple of months and the way the fans have reacted overall to what they've seen. Um, I myself went to see a show over the summer with a friend of mine, and there was like one good match on it. It was a letdown. It was fun because you're out with somebody and you're having a good time, and it's like, oh, we're laughing, and but you're looking at it, breaking it down, like really at the end of the night, we're like, yeah, that wasn't really a great card, was it? So they're not
No.
overly, they're not overly killing it with, and again, it's not. I'm not a booker, but I kind of feel like we talked about this too. Like this is going to go along with what I'm saying. Like when you watched, as we said earlier, the AWA dying a slow death, you started to see these really stupid specialty matches in half, three-quarter empty arenas. They're doing TV for ESPN and it's half empty, and you've got like three guys left that, from the roster, and it's bad. It's
Yeah, they
they're
had
kind
that
of
what was that? It was in its dying days. They see if I can find it here. They had a like tournament thing, uh, and I don't remember what it was called. It was like the uh, AWA Superstar Challenge or something, and it was like
I
a
don't even
round robin
remember.
tournament. And like, but from what I remember of it, like because guys were literally like just leaving in the middle of the tournament, saying, I'm done. I'm buy me out of my contract, whatever. Don't
I
pay
don't
me.
even
I
think there
don't
were
care because I'm
contracts back
done.
then. No, I think they could
Right.
just walk if they
They,
wanted. Like nobody was locked
they
down.
right. And the rules changed. Like every week there was a new set of rules.
Well, it's funny you touched on that because are we not back to that now? I know what the rules of wrestling are. I was trained in it. I mean, yes, they might vary from promotion to promotion, for specialty match to specialty match, but in general, there's an unofficial rule book for wrestling. You remember the big gimmick Chris Jericho used to do? He's going to get out the rule book of wrestling, and I think he even had the book. There is an
Yeah,
unofficial. We just know, okay, you're doing this type of match. This is the we generally know, okay, you've got a 10 count on the outside. It's typically 10 count. There are 20 count. You got 5 to break. You've got 5 to be in the ring with your opponent in a tag match, and then you got to get out. You only get 3 breaks, 2 breaks, and then the third one is you're DQ'd for coming in and breaking up a pin. They don't touch on that anymore. So the rules have been thrown out. There's no closed fist. You can just go in and punch the crap out of somebody now. That's been thrown out for 20 years. But there's not a lot to do to get for the heel to get heat. You've got to blatantly cheat now, and you got to do it behind the ref's back, and it's getting harder and harder to do that. And the 1 week it might be a double count out. You see the exact same finish, even on the same show sometimes, and it's a no contest, and it's like, okay, be consistent. I don't want to hear about, well, everybody knows it's predetermined. Everybody, I don't care. They can't suspend their belief. I also know that, I'm, as you know, Howard, I'm hooked on The Walking Dead now. I'm 10, 15 years too late.
yeah,
I know that that's not real, but I don't want the actor to stop in the middle of the thing. But, I forgot my line. Let me run over and ask the director. And that's all on film. That's what's literally happening in wrestling now. I don't want 1 minute, this is the rule of the show, and then the next minute, well, wait a minute. I thought unless it's explained to me in the context of a story why a monster or a zombie or a werewolf might be morphing. Like, if this is what they are, don't just change it without kind of letting the viewer understand why. And wrestling does that a lot. They change a lot of things to fit a particular match without explaining a rule set. Sometimes they do. I think it's not done enough, and I
right.
think what I see now is more just kind of greenness covering up for screw ups rather than that's really the actual rules. We've talked about 3 counts from the referees. They've been suspect. Fans are calling that out. There's been count outs where the people blatantly didn't make it back in the ring in time. That's not what you want to see. That's akin to your favorite movie, your favorite song. In the middle of it, you're sitting there rocking out on Sirius XM, and wait a minute, we screwed up. Let us start the song over again. Well, that should never happen because it's recorded. You always go fix your mistake, right? You should get a polished
Right.
product. Well, we happen to be live without a net most of the time, right? So a lot of the shows are live.
Mm,
If they are taped, and yes, I know that I'm well aware that there's been times in different eras where matches had to go back and be taped again because it didn't quite go the way they wanted. But for the most part, it should be live without a net. I don't want to see on your big live show an inconsistent 10 count being outside of the ring, an inconsistent 10 count when it comes to somebody getting up. That's why fans are upset. They're not upset because their favorite person isn't winning. They're upset because they're blatantly being told, hey, we're screwing up and we really don't care enough to make this as real as we can for you, as entertaining as we can for you. You know what I mean?
right. So to get back to it because I had to look it up.
Would you
The
look up?
AWA had a
That
tournament
match,
called the
yeah.
Team Challenge Series. Now
Oh
they
boy,
took the
I don't even
wrestlers
remember.
from the AWA and divided them up into 3 teams. Larry's
Okay,
Legends, which was captained by Larry
Zabisco.
Zabisco,
I can't believe we didn't
Sergeant
mention
Snipers.
Zabisco. Jeez.
Sergeant Snipers
Oh boy,
originally headed
Slaughter.
up by Sergeant Slaughter, and then Baron's Blitzers headed up by Baron von Raschke. Now,
Mm-hmm.
right after they announced this thing, I think they have like 1 match, and Sergeant Slaughter leaves. He goes back to the WWF,
Yeah.
and Colonel De Beers takes over, and he renames his team the De Beers Diamond Cutters. and they
Okay.
explain that Sergeant Slaughter is going AWOL to explain his leaving, and they
Hmm.
have all kinds of other stars walking out to the point to where it says here some of the Team Challenge Series matches took place in a pink-colored TV studio with no audience. The kayfabe explanation was that the
Oh,
matches
I
were being
remember
held at
that.
a remote location to reduce interference, when it was really just poor ticket sales. And then it got so bad that they
Oh,
had a Royal Rumble style battle royal with the last few remaining people, and of course the prize was the winning team got a share of $1 million, right?
wasn't
And
it?
Milliman,
Mhm.
the legendary Jake Milliman,
He was
jobber
more
of
of a local
of
guy there,
jobbers,
though.
yes,
Yeah, he was
but
like
he
local to
won the
the.
battle royal, and he won the check for Larry's Legends, and that
Okay,
was pretty much the death nail
man. So who else?
in
God, they
AWA.
they were really taking people at that point. So Larry would have gone to
Mm-hmm.
WCW, NWA, whatever it was still at the time. That was a confusing time for us NWA fans. Um,
Yes.
Larry would have gone. De Beers, I think, even at one point, didn't he end up in WWF for a short period of time? Wasn't right then,
I can
but
check.
I
Well,
feel like he was with. Wasn't
and
he
I
with
know they
Iron
got
Sheik? I don't
Let me
remember.
see
I feel
here.
like he was.
Years 3 years.
They took a bunch of guys. Um,
No, he actually went
wow.
to UWF.
He went to UWF. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But that's where they got Eric Bischoff came from the AWA.
AWA. Yeah.
Um,
It's
yeah, he was never in the WWF.
That's what I mean. Like it's almost to the point now where like again, dying on the vine or already dead. Like how long is it going to be before people can't afford these tickets? I don't think long. Um, it's obviously yeah, it's time for somebody to step up and kind of resurrect it. And I don't think it's an attraction driven business, but I don't think one particular star is going to do that and ignite it right now. I think it's going to
Right.
take a series of really good booking, great performances, um, building up some of the younger talent and that can really still perform, because a lot of guys that, when you say that, and I'm a victim of it too. I wrestle much different than I did, 15 years ago, but some of the guys aren't young anymore and they're doing styles that are really, really hard on their body. Um, so it's not necessarily an indictment on them that the performances aren't what they should be. I just think maybe they're either being asked to do something that they aren't really, it's not best suited for, but it's more so the inconsistency too in some of the booking, like it just
Well, the
um,
booking is very inconsistent. I mean,
and
without a doubt.
you got injuries. You got a lot of injuries, which comes from years and years of abuse. More of a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not daredevil, but more of a high risk style. Um, it's there's still a lot of that type of thing. There's a lot of throws where people are still landing close to the back of their neck, back on their shoulders. Um, the German suplexes are okay if you can place the guy right, but
Right.
there's a lot of like throws that are, hard on the body. There's a lot of big bumps, multiple big bumps in a match. Um, there's a lot of stuff that's hard on people's bodies, so you can't really sustain
Well,
that over
there's
decades and decades of.
right. We I don't, and to me, listen, and I'm not the 2% or whatever, but I don't need that. I just want to see wrestling. I don't
Yeah.
need people, dropping somebody through 7 tables with light tubes on it, on fire, wrapped in barbed wire, and
Well, all that
drowning each
stuff
other
is
in
in
fish
the
tanks.
that
And
that's all in the back of your pickup truck when you're going to go get into a street fight, right? Like, you always carry that
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah, I mean,
right?
I literally,
Yeah.
yeah, I carry all of
Hmm.
that stuff, I mean, I
Yeah.
got probably 7 or 8 fish tanks in the back of my truck now, and ironically, with it raining, they're probably full of water, so we're good.
Yeah, there you
It
go.
just,
Yeah, sometimes when you push the limit
I
of
don't.
believability, it, the name of the game is entertainment, understood. But sometimes
Right,
when you push the threshold of believability, you put the entire wrestling business in a bad position because then you've either got to up the ante or kind of admit that it was failed. Nobody's going to admit that it failed. So now let's up the ante. Okay, so we'll have two next time. Well, let's put a piranha in it and shove his face in there. Then, and these guys. Some of these guys and what they're willing to do too is foreign to me. Um, I understand that staged violence for the sake of the match is necessary. We've talked about color before. It's you know the old term though was um, red for green. Is anybody bleeding now
yeah,
in the last 25 years? Legitimately, can somebody really make me an argument that it absolutely was done to draw money? And it wasn't, because that era had
right,
passed. Um, it was once Vince came out and said, "Oh, wrestling's a sports entertainment." That kind of saying was off the table now because now we know it's theatrics to the point where I've literally had fans argue with me, "Oh, you guys use blood capsules. It's not a blood capsule, but whatever." So it's not a draw for money anymore. It was back in the day. If you were going to get busted open, Howard, and you were going to bleed all over the place, and what did TA say? He liked to do that because he would get that babyface sympathy. And babyface doesn't want heat.
right,
No, put that on the heel. The heel should get. Babyface wants that sympathy, man. If he's bleeding and he can't get up and they want to come back and see him again, right? That's not the case anymore. Now it's done more for theatrics, and it's okay. But when you keep upping the ante
right,
with certain things like that, well, how much are you going to bleed? How many quarts are you going to dump out? Like, what crazy spot are you going to do that causes that? You have to stop and ask yourself, is it worth it? And 9 times out of 10, it's not. It's worth it if you're
right,
progressing the story. What I say a couple weeks ago on here NVOC, I reiterate it. The only point of booking, the only reason we work anything is to make money. That's the end result of booking.
yeah,
Subjective
right,
on how you
right,
get there, but when you do unrealistic things to get there, you're ultimately putting your dollar, your money, the business end of this on the line. Because now you've got to escalate to the point where now a chair shot doesn't mean anything. 15, 20 years ago, you saw Jeff Hardy come off a ladder, the crowd comes unglued. Comes off a ladder now, they're just like, well, there wasn't a spike at the bottom that he landed on and impaled himself, so I don't care. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. You keep having to up the ante, and we can joke about it and laugh, but
right,
it that's what would be necessary. Like, I joked around and I was joking with the guys when we did our last ECWA show. I was like, well, fellas, if we don't pull this one off, the next thing we'll need to convince the crowd that, we're fighting out there is a Spectre gunship to come over and blow the place up and everybody dies, and then they'll believe it. I mean, how much are
yeah,
we going to escalate the violence instead of just taking the crowd on a ride where they believe the violence organically? Or it doesn't have to be violent. It's competition too. Maybe a heel and a
right,
face, or just
right,
being competitive, and one guy just wants to take the shortcut to get there. It doesn't always have to be ultra violent or violent at all. You escalate the violence to draw money, to progress a feud, storyline, whatever you want to call them these days. If we're in a feud,
right.
we can't always just be stalemated, right? Well, here's Howard and Mozart wrestling for the fourth time, and we've not had a definitive winner
And
yet,
it's
and
and it's the same,
yeah,
match,
we've
over and
you
over
know
again.
like you'd escalate, like, with a with a pinfall. Well, if I'm the heel, then I'm mad about it. Then we come back and maybe I cheat the win. Then you might lose by a count out. So even though you're a babyface, you fell out of the ring and got busted open, and I had nothing to do with it. I capitalized on a count out. Now we're going to come back and we're going to do a no count out match. No DQ. However you want to tell the story is okay. But the point of that booking is to make money, to make people want to come back and see the return matches, the escalation of the feud. Are we going to draw other people in, or is it going to stay our own issue? There's no right way, I don't think, to book. No definitive way, I should say. There's a right way, but there's no definitive way you have to do it. You can be as creative as you want. There's been many, many great storytellers on the independent scene over the years, both booking wise and performance wise. That's where I'm hurting. That's where my heart hurts a little bit with the major products right now. It's like, you guys are dead. It's time to resurrect it. I don't want to come in and see missed punches, missed kicks, people dropping people, a top star that can't get to the top rope without almost passing out. It's like, well, you probably should get to the gym, I've seen all
Right.
these things, top stars that can't make it back in to beat a very fair, great cadence, 10 count for the outside of the ring, don't heel your referee out. That's wrestling 101. If you take credibility away from the referee, it doesn't mean anything. It's all going to get shit on. The fans are going to go home. They're not going to go home remembering that great match that you talk about, like when you go see an independent show, or you turn on the TV with your grandson or your folks when you started watching it. You're going to go home talking about that blown spot. And that's what happens way too many times.
Yep.
Did I
Absolutely.
soapbox? Let's call this episode Mozart's on a soapbox and Howard's looking up the history.
So as we fill this rabbit hole back in, because I think we've dug it deep enough, and want to give Steve enough time to listen to it and do his magic and everything.
Steve, you don't have to listen.
Not sure when this will drop. Right. It is. We are recording. It's a Tuesday night, right?
Yeah.
Today's Tuesday. Yeah. Because and
I'm interested if you guys could drop some comments though, because we talk about some compelling stuff on here, but really what matters is what the fans think. This is just our perspectives. Howard from a historian. Myself from just being a fan, a bit of a historian, have some experience in the ring. So we're bringing some good conversation, but really, where are we off? Are we completely wrong? Are we right? What do you guys have an idea on who can...
Listen, tell us. I love constructive criticism. I love any kind of criticism, good, bad, or indifferent.
He does, because I'll
take it a little
all the time.
further. If there's something, if there's a rabbit hole you want us to go down, shoot us a comment. You'd love to hear about this, or what's your take on this? And so
there are so many
us two knuckleheads can talk about anything.
But Howard, there are so many conspiracies in wrestling. Like it's fun to talk about them from a fan's perspective. Because there's stuff that even being in wrestling, like you just don't really know if it's true or not. Like I've heard, there are some things I know.
But it's been around so long, it almost but they've been around so long that you're like, wow, did that really happen,
like
or
thing now
is it just a story?
Well, there's all the older stars now are attacking everything. I'm going to expose this one for that. I'm going to talk about this. Oh, the real story behind this is. And the thing is you'll never get any consistency from any of that. I know with great certainty that there's some things that are coming out now that I've heard for years. Does it lean credibility to maybe there might be something to it? Because where there's smoke, there's fire. Yeah, probably. But is it being overstated? Is it being, are people speaking what they don't know and just what they think? Because, again, man, it's almost as funny to watch the wrestlers it's not funny, but it's peculiar to watch the wrestlers tear each other down as much as like the fans will crap on the product too, like I'm not sure I really care enough about you know, who screwed over who, and who wasn't good to work with and who was. And it's like, well, that's also a subjective thing, because somebody could say this person wasn't good, but then somebody else could come along and say, yeah, they were great, we had great matches together, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
what do you, that's kind of how
Absolutely.
it's going. Like, what do you, maybe we can dive into that too, but if we could get some ideas, because we love a good conspiracy, but we're also not here
I
to,
love conspiracy.
I do too, but I don't want to perpetuate anything that I don't know about. Like that's why I don't like
Right. That we
dropping
can't validate.
names
We
per
want to be able to
se. Yeah,
validate. Yeah.
because there's some pretty strong accusations, and I mean everybody's going to guess, but there's some pretty major star. There's a major star that's come out and made some serious accusations about a time period, and it's like, yes, I've heard that for many many years, but do I know that to be true? I have no clue, because I didn't work there. You know, it's
Right.
just kind of wrestling lore. It's been kind of handed down. Like, hey, did you ever hear that? And it's not necessarily like even locker room talk. It's just stuff that mainly comes up. I don't know. I'll call it like restaurant bar room talk. Who knows if it's true or not? It's
Yeah.
pretty serious accusations. But I love a
Right.
good conspiracy, but I don't want to perpetuate any nonsense either. You know.
Right. Yeah. We want to hear what's out there. But again, drop us any kind of comment, Lee, whatever you want to talk about, something, how you like the show, how you hated the show, things you think we could do different. And listen, we'll ignore all the comments, because we just do what we do. But
Listen,
no, we will, we'll
I'll
love to
break out
hear
my
from
cell
you.
phone.
This is a
Howard, I'll break out my cell phone
what's
for
that?
you when the cats get into a fight again. I'll break out a cell phone for you, because man, they go at it. They make these wrestlers look kind of wimpy. They start getting nasty. They start growling and howling at each other, and I'm trying to get between them, and I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. Cats,
Yeah,
coffee pots,
you probably shouldn't do that at all.
coffee pots,
But
roast beef,
guys,
and in
thank
my
you.
case, at least the
Oh,
meat's living. You almost died from non-living meat. I'm at least trying to
it
separate
it
a
was it was a horrible, horrible experience. Episode 5 or 6 will explain all of
yeah.
that. Um,
Listen,
I think
kids.
it's probably the only down the rabbit hole episode that I remember, and it's like something that Howard has survived the Magnum universe or something like that. Look that
Exactly.
up, and it's titled along those lines.
Poor
But
Howard.
guys, it's been
Here's
a
your
pleasure.
PSA, kids. Don't steal roast beef from yourself from a hot crock pot and choke on it. And
Right,
don't
not from
get
the
in
hot
between a
crock pot.
cat
Yes,
fight.
and chew.
Yeah.
Always chew your food. Always
Chew your
chew your
food
food plenty of times before you swallow
32
it.
times before you
And
swallow
you know,
it. And then don't get into a cat fight or a fight
right,
with your coffee
and
maker, because you're
and
not
as
winning.
as we sign off, I'm going to just kind of wind up Mozart a little bit more, just because I like
Oh, here he
to.
goes. Steve,
And
he's making the
as
show
I
run
say in
long.
closing, keep your boots laced, your promos tight, and your finish protected.
Yes. I love
Everybody
it.
have a great night.
Great news.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.